And I have an overview I'll go over too, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Welcome to the Town of Newfields Conservation Commission. I am Allison Watt. I am the chair.
Christian Alaris.
Caleb Fields. Josh Lynn, co-chair.
Tom Redberg.
Chris McDade.
Lauren Hill.
So we're very things on the agenda today. The first thing that we're going to talk about is a parking management plan. During that discussion, that plan was authored. And fair amount of work put together, although that was quite a while ago. Just be careful of any perception of bias or conflict of interest. I'm going to recuse myself during the discussion and during the vote. So during that time, it's going to be sharing.
Okay. As a brief introduction, the Concom meeting on November 17th, 2025, focused on whether parking associated with the Vernon family farm is allowed within the conservation easement. The commission voted that parking is allowed within the easement area, provided it supports agriculture. The commission then evaluated whether parking impairs conservation values, the soil health, land condition, open space. Concerns raised include soil compaction from vehicles, lack of sufficient data or third-party analysis, whether impacts are temporary and remediable. The commission determined that two things. There is not yet enough evidence to confirm parking has no negative impact, and two, further assessment is required to evaluate environmental effects. So the commission agreed that the town and Vernon Family Farm must take additional steps to study and mitigate impacts from parking. So right now, at this moment, parking is conditionally allowed, but it's not unrestricted. So there are two key requirements. Parking must be tied to agricultural use, and the farm must demonstrate that parking does not harm the easement. So the motion that was passed on November 17th regarding the need for the parking plan, I just wanted to read that to refresh where we're at. So the town and Vernon Family Farm have additional steps to determine that parking in the easement area does not significantly impair or interfere with the conservation value of the easement. Accordingly, Vernon Family Farm shall work directly with NRCS or equivalent entity to assess soil impact associated with parking, if any, and develop a written plan to mitigate any negative impacts to the soils, including but not limited to soil compaction and erosion. As part of its assessment, NRCS or equivalent shall assess whether limitations should be placed upon parking to ensure the long-term integrity of the soils and other conservation values, including water resources for the purposes set forth in the original easement deed, and the plan shall address the scenic view from Piscassic Road as well. Vernon Family Farm shall provide a written plan to the Conservation Commission by May 1st, 2026 for approval by the Newfields Conservation Commission. So that's where we left it off in November. Fast forward, the plan was provided to the Concom on April 29th, 2026. So the deadline was met. The plan is 27 pages. I'll do a brief summary of it. So key findings from the soil assessment. The parking area, which is around 0.7 acres, sits on Canton fine sandy loam. It's well drained, low runoff potential, deep seasonal water table. It's the best soil type on the property for that use. Second bullet, after 12 years of occasional event parking, no observable soil compaction, erosion, rutting, or vegetative degradation attributed to parking was found. 3, a 915-foot vegetated buffer separates the parking area from the Piscasset River, far exceeding the recommended minimums. And lastly, the ground pressure from the parked passenger cars is comparable to farm tractors and cattle hooves, so it is not uniquely harmful. So the management plan prescribes the following to manage the parking. Parking only spring through the fall, so only on dry soil, so no mud season, no post-rain saturated conditions. Specific wet soil shutdown triggers, so standing water, ruts deeper than 2 inches, rainfall greater than ½ an inch in 24 hours. A controlled one-way traffic lane in predefined parking rows. Routine pasture maintenance, overseeding, shallow aeration, compost amendments as needed. And lastly, annual end of season monitoring with defined corrective action thresholds. So that was a very brief summary of 27 pages, but so with that summary, I'll open it up to discussion.
Do you want a presentation from us or board discussion only or commission discussion only at this time?
No, presentation is good.
Okay. So I didn't want to jump in.
Thank you.
You all want to. So thank you for having us here tonight.
Get up to the microphone, please, because the,
Sure. You know what? I didn't see anything in the stand. Oh, I see you've got your microphone there. Absolutely.
thank you. It's for anybody who might be online. Thank you.
So by way of introductions, my name is Amy Manzelli from BCM Law, and I'm here as legal counsel for Vernon Family Farm. Also, we have Rob Rosen, who I will ask to introduce himself when I hand it over, and Nicole Vernon. The better that the one, however you want to say it. Just one, Vernon Family Farm, just one, along with Jeremiah. There's not much to add. You covered sort of how we've gotten to submitting the soil management report and the key findings of the soil management report. I did just want to go back a little bit and describe what Vernon Family Farm is. Vernon Family Farm is a community-centered pasture livestock farm. Vernon Family Farm has been operating in this location for over a decade. And part of its marketing is through agritourism events. So anytime we're talking about events, event parking, we're talking about agritourism. Agritourism is part of the state's definition of agriculture. Part of that state definition requires for it to meet that state definition of agritourism, that it includes products of the farm. Additionally, in this town's site plan approval from 2022, there's a requirement that the farm's products be marketed in connection with agritourism events. And this commission discussed that concept as well. So the concept that these agritourism events include products of the farm is multi-layered into the agritourism events. I think that's all the stage that I'm going to set in addition to that really comprehensive introduction. I think I just let Rob go through the plan. That's really what we're here for tonight. And I'll leave it to you, Rob, whether we want to take questions as we're going along or if the commission wants to look at them.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah.
All right, good evening. I'm Robert Rosen with Watershed Engineering. I'm a water resources engineer and I deal with this type of work a lot. Soils, infiltration, stormwater management. And so as Mr. Lynn mentioned, essentially the task of the soil, I'm sorry, the parking management plan was really to do kind of two things. The first was the soil assessment, see how things have gone for the last 12 years, and then two, to establish a plan or a control aspect to ensure that the conservation easement elements are maintained and protected. So I won't repeat too much of what you said. So I think what I'm going to do is kind of hit it as a high level, and then we can go into detailed questions if you'd like, because I don't think you want me to go through all the elements of the 27-page plan. Most of it's pictures, but a lot of it's pictures. But I think it's important to understand that. So the farm's been in operation for roughly 12 years, and so the soil assessment was done essentially just by looking at the area that's been used and looking for obvious signs of soil compaction or soil impacts, because that would be contradictory to the easement, which is a protection of this parcel, forever, but for a long time anyway. And so the obvious things that we would see under soil compaction, you can see obvious rutting, you would see stressed plants, you would see invasives, you would see large scale erosion, you might see runoff, so concentrated runoff. All of those are indicators of soil compaction, and all of those are indicators of soils that are under stress. And so part of that, you'll see here, there's a table that reviews the last 3 years, actually the last 2 years plus the what's anticipated for 2026 for these sort of large scale musical events. These are the largest events they have. And the numbers are not enormous. There were, I don't remember exactly what they were, but I think it was 12 one year, 24 in another, and maybe 24 in another. But that's it, more or less. You don't need to be exact. But so the numbers are not enormous in the far end of what is the permitted number. And so one of the things you'll see in the management plan is we don't restrict the existing conditions that were part of the border. So we're not proposing to step back from what those conditions are, but we are proposing in terms of management our shutdown criteria, so that if there are any indicators of the impacts to soil health, that can be managed. I'm going to pause there briefly because that's the soil. That's the soil impact assessment. It's probably a good place to start and answer questions before we get into the management plan itself. And actually, I did want to mention one other thing, which Mr. Lynn already mentioned. That is a really good point of reference, which is table 3, which is the range of ground pressure for common uses. And it's good to see, just for a reference point for contextually how we're doing. So human foot traffic, for example, might be 5 to 8 PSI pound per square inch. Horse hoofs might be 15 to 30. A passenger vehicle might be 30 to 35. So we're roughly in the same range. We're overlapping there. Passenger vehicles, slow movement on earth would be in the 20 to 35. And then we're into farm tractors and ag equipment are also in the upper range of 30. So we're in the overlap range. So the point of recognizing that is this doesn't present a unique risk. So I think your task as the Concom is to make sure that conservation easement is maintained, right? And the mission of the conservation is the protection of the soils long term. This is not a unique risk that we can't manage with the plan. Okay, so I want to leave it at that. Yeah.
I could have a question because I don't recall seeing anything in the report specifically about contaminants, and some of our townspeople had mentioned concerns about contaminants from oil leakage and other fluids that might be in the soils.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's not mentioned as directly as say leaking fluids or anything, but it is mentioned from the standpoint of the vegetative buffer protection. So so again, the question we ask ourselves is a unique risk. There's fluids and other things that are going to be used in a farm setting. And what we particularly reference is, amongst other things, oh, actually, I wanted to take one big step back. One other thing that is a kind of a controlling element of this review is that everything is here based on NRCS based practices. So we cite their management plan approach and specific conservation practices that they talk about. So that's important again contextually because everything we're doing is under the auspices of sort of the NRCS based practices. Okay. That's important because what we're not holding it up to is a standard, say, for a commercial parking lot or a residential parking lot, where those are slightly different standards. Okay. But that isn't to say that that we're not addressing that. So bringing us back again, vegetative buffers are a well-recognized best management practice, and one of the conservation practices that is cited here are vegetative buffers. So typically, when we talk about a vegetative buffer, we can even be talking 50 or 100 feet. We're in excess of 900 feet in this case. And one of the studies we cite is this. It's Bob. I don't remember what that is. Vegetative buffers from the Bay. I think vegetative buffers from the Bay. And so what they're essentially trying to do is they work with farms and other places to identify protecting large easement or large buffer zones, vegetative buffer zones that would manage any of that. So again, if you real specific answer your question, contaminants are going to get in there. What's going to happen with those? They're going to be filtered out in the process. Alice and I are prior together. I used to be the director of the UNH Stormwater Center, and one of the things we would study a lot is how do best management practices manage things like metals and petroleum hydrocarbons. And under low loading, you're basically looking at complete removal. Petroleum hydrocarbons are removed because they're basically food that are consumed by the biota that are in the soil. So that's different than a 100-gallon spill or a 1,000-gallon spill, and they would be required, I'm sure, under their normal operations to report anything like that anyhow. And so again, it's not a unique risk.
Yeah, what follow-up question to that? You did note, it says in the report that the best practices from the UNH Stormwater Center, but it notes it's a 99% removal of common stormwater pollutants. And it says includes solids such as total phosphorus, total nitrogen, total zinc. Does that study or does that best practice also accommodate for brake fluids, petroleum
hydrocarbons?
Yeah. So anything from gasoline, brake dust, metals, things like that. If I went to check out that report, it would note those kinds of things, and 99% of that would be handled by that buffer.
Yeah, so the answer to that is no, it does not. And that's generally not the way EPA operates. Not to dismiss your question, because this is an important question. The way that these things are done is they typically use what are considered to be indicator pollutants. In the same way that when we look at bacteria, we look at 2 or 3 bacteria typically. We don't look at the 50 or 100 that might be out there. So we look at indicator pieces. So the ones I cited were like indicator nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus. Metals, zinc is a very common metal, so we would look at that.
So those are reflective of those other things, brake dust, oil.
Generally speaking, but it's not as complete, and I don't want to mislead you, it's not as complete as that. And actually, in generally speaking, on the literature, you will not find that type of information. It's just because the breadth of that in terms of the thoroughness, it's just not done that way. And it's not that that's not a good question. Now, if we were talking about drinking water standards do that. Runoff standards often do not. But then this gets into a little bit of a philosophical conversation that there's a whole range of non-priority pollutants, like literally thousands of these things that we just simply don't test for. It's not a good thing. You hear about things like PFAS and other things like that eventually come to our attention. But PFAS is one of these non-priority pollutants that now has become a priority. So, I mean, I'm not really fully answering your question other than to say, I think from the standards that we see professionally, it absolutely meets that standard, but it does not meet the standard that you're asking, which is some of these things that aren't generally covered.
So would you say though, would that warrant any kind of more data oriented measures? Because I think when I looked through the report, the one thing that struck me was everything is pretty observation based. And I would imagine over the course of time, observation will only tell you so much, that there should be some kind of more measurable or meaningful testing.
Yeah, I actually, I don't, you see, I don't think so a little bit, and that's, and if we're a different location, I might agree with you on that. And the reason why I say that is because it's important to keep this in the context of NRCS-based practices, right? So if we were talking about a commercial site over a groundwater aquifer, that perhaps then maybe we would have monitoring wells located. And as an example, I helped permit the Lowe's Target that's in Greenland back in 2006, and that's on a brownfield site. It's a commercial setting, and there is background monitoring that's done for that, but that's a 10,000 vehicle per day lot with tractor trailers, and we're talking about fairly low numbers here. And one of the things that's really important to remember in the NRCS-based practices for the conservation plan, they want to identify management approaches that are not additionally cumbersome to farms, recognizing that farming is a tough business. And so if I was writing this management plan for a commercial business or an HOA or something like that, where there's dues and we're generating $5,000 or $10,000 a year for that it might include those sorts of things. But NRCS-based conservation plan is really careful that you're not to put management measures on them that are an undue burden. That is supposed to be a healthy balance.
So those indicator.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'd like to jump on both Chris McDade and Chris Chandeliers. Everything you're addressing though is the 915 foot that separates from the river, not immediately where the parking lot is. So according to the report, there's no scientific report on that area whatsoever.
I'm not sure what you're saying, but you're asking everything.
You're addressing effects on the Piscassic River.
Yeah.
And yes, that can be a concern, but we're here to represent conservation land. So we haven't addressed, this doesn't address at all the actual parking area and what effects this has on it. And I did notice kind of when you went through the impacts of parking, you skipped over the pickups and SUVs, which is the primary source parking there, and it's almost double too. So I want to go back to actual impacts on the parking area, not 915 feet away to the river.
Okay, so let's break that word down. So I'm separating things, right? 915 feet to the river is the risk associated with SCAS. Right. But the other pieces that I was talking about, so soil impacts, obvious things such as rutting, impacts of vegetation, et cetera. Those are addressing the direct conservation pieces of where the parking is. So I'm not talking Piscassic there, I'm talking about the 0.7 acre parking area. And so the water quality, and correct, we didn't talk about this part, but I'll bring it up now, is if you're concerned, say, for example, for groundwater contamination. So that the same is really true for what I was talking about for the Piscassic. The mechanisms are a little different. So if we think about a vegetative buffer, we're talking about filtration through vegetation as it goes long term. If we're thinking about, and that's more of a mechanical filtration, if we think about filtration as it goes vertically through soil profile, that is something that's even a higher level treatment. It's the highest level of treatment we can get because you have a dense root mat, you have a fine filter media, you would be hard pressed to find, you almost could not design a higher quality filter for water quality treatment than a heavy, robust pasture. The water quality below that would be, assuming you're not doing landfill, sludge and all those other things, would be as good as you're gonna get.
You have soil testing, scientific reports backing that up then at
For
that
this
area?
site.
Correct.
No, but I could absolutely provide you references on that, peer reviewed literature for sure, if that was necessary.
Because I saw in the report, it's just a general, you know, everything comes up as a silty loam, but everything in Rockingham County comes up as a silty loam, but that's not always the case.
Well, actually, if you look at the soil map, not the whole site is a silty loam. There's a 42E, which was the Canton, sandy loam, and that is on, that is figure 3. And then, but there, a lot of the site is other pieces in there. So we have,
But my point is, you're going off a general soils map, you haven't done any testing on the parking area. Or where like the porta potties, fuel containers, dumpsters, or waste oil dumpsters are.
Well, those aren't on the conservation.
They are actually, if you look at his map, he delineates it perfectly and they're all on conservation.
no, that we did not do soils testing. We did not put in monitoring.
Right.
We didn't do soil runoff monitoring. But I didn't do soil compaction testing. There's a lot of things that we're not done there. That's correct.
Which is what we were actually looking for.
Not entirely. I have the, it says, you'll have, to assess soil impacts associated with parking, if any, and develop a written plan. When I read to assess soil impacts, to me, that's a professional judgment piece. If I had read something that said, there'll be soil compaction testing, there'll be wells driven, we will do on-site monitoring, we will look at groundwater contamination, all of those, that's what I would have expected.
Yeah, if we read back through the minutes, we actually did discuss soil testing and compaction testing.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, to your point, if you look at his map, he specifically puts all those items on conservation. I know the pins went missing from there, but everything is on conservation and still is today. So you have waste oil, dumpsters, fuel containers, transfer tank containers. So that's why we're really looking.
Parking.
It's all on the conservation.
No, but the scope of this was the parking management, not the overall impact from the farming conservation plan. The scope was the parking management plan.
Okay. Yeah, as a board, we're looking at the
On
whole.
the soils.
Sure. As a board, we're
Not
looking at the whole.
body next to the band. That's not part of this. Not where the tractor's stored, because that's also not part of this. Those are direct agricultural operations. That's not part of this.
Okay.
It's not, the scope was the parking.
That's part of it, but you've done no soil testing there.
No. Okay. But I did do soil impact assessment.
So a few minutes ago, you mentioned along the lines of something egregious happened,
Yeah.
then there would be additional reporting required by who? Yeah, elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So we have soil shutdown criteria. Yeah, and there's a fairly long list. The soil shutdown criteria.
No, I don't mean actually for the rain and things like that.
Okay.
I'm referring to if that oil tank sprung a crack and went out
Gotcha.
along those cases you mentioned, so.
Yeah, so that was not included in the soil management plan, assuming that's part of standard farm operations, but if, I mean, we can certainly add that to this. That's assumed to be the case. At any time, there would be a spill on site right there. So there's state requirements for that. Generally, when you would see, I don't remember what it is, I think it's a 50-gallon spill. I don't recall. There are state mandated requirements that we can absolutely.
Yeah, I don't,
in the management.
I don't see the need to add that to the management plan. We can keep it within the scope of parking.
So I also don't see the need to require that, but yes, generally speaking, any business, I mean, this town hall is heated with heating oil. If there's a spill, you gotta call the state. because the focus of this plan is managing the soil, and it's just a slippery slope if we start listing all of the other legal requirements that apply to the farm generally. There are a lot of legal requirements that apply to the farm generally, and they're following them. So I think we acknowledge they have that requirement, just like everybody does.
To your point, though, this is separate from the parking, but I think what was previously discussed, porta potties, fuel fields, not on conservation area, separate from the parking issue.
Yes, I mean, my understanding of tonight's agenda item is the soil management plan for the parking area.
Yeah, I just
So-
want to be clear about the other component.
Yeah, I do understand the Conservation Commission has a general duty to make sure that the lands that it is overseeing as part of its fiduciary duty are appropriately conserved. The farm is appropriately managing all of its conservation area. And we went over, all of the porta potty and the oil tank. And we have agreed if any of those farm assets are on conservation land or the Conservation Commission is uncomfortable with that the farm is amenable to having a discussion about moving those. But we're not prepared to have that discussion tonight. So we're ready to talk about the parking.
So I have a question. You were talking, I think with, what Thomas mentioned, you started talking a little bit more about the weather, the shutdown criteria. How is that managed? Is that independently managed? Who determines the shutdown criteria? What kind of oversight, to ensure that we're adhering to those criteria?
Right.
Yeah, like third party independent, how's that managed?
Yeah, so again, yeah, no third party independent, would just be part of, this would become a requirement of operation. So it would be something that would be done by farm staff, by the Verdants themselves. And then the proof in the pudding would be the annual, the annual inspections, right? How well is this doing? Is there a need to modify or mitigate or do any sort of different control measures? And the term that's used here, which I'm blanking on at the moment, it's sorry, give me a moment here. Term is but it's essentially just adjust as you go, and there's a variety of things that we would know. They will know how to operate. It's going to be fairly simple. If you have so the wet shutdown criteria are which Mr. Lynn mentioned earlier, which are it's based on a certain amount of rainfall, the time after rainfall. And the simplest piece is the degree of running. So if the running is significant, any one of those conditions you'd have to shut it down. And in this condition, so you can imagine if, for example, if you were in different soils, that this would be a pretty restrictive, could be fairly restrictive. But given the soil type and the location, so there's two things going on here. You have a standing loam, which means well-drained soil. And then you have the fact that it's sort of on the peak, on the shoulder, so the water tends to run off. If you were on the bottom of an area, what you would expect to see is that the soil would be, or the water would hang up, that the water would be persistent, and it would be wet for a long time. So if you were to pick a place to park, this is really kind of the ideal spot.
So in your experience, it's self-governance, is that a best practice for managing?
It depends, but yes, that is standard. Yeah, and the way that that's often managed is through auditing of records and things like that. So, for example, yeah, or actually the most common one is that it's not part of this. But the most common one is, and for example, in town, let's say we permit a new residential subdivision that's under an HOA, or a new small business, a lot of times there's annual reporting that's required. Sometimes that annual reporting is kept in-house, so that if the town were to ask, you have to provide that information. It's a standard thing throughout the industry, but there's accountability in that. And so those are the sorts of things that are fairly common and a good way to ensure that things are done as permitted. This is the question you asked is a classic challenge in permitting, whether we're talking, no matter what we're talking about, industrial, commercial, residential. How do you get people to comply with the long-term conditions? And the usual part of that is just the annual reporting.
But this isn't like an HOA, so you have an inherent conflict here. Because conflict of interest here is canceling events is a financial burden then too.
I would disagree. It's no different than a commercial business on the corner. Commercial business on the corner doesn't have an HOA, but they would still be responsible for it. And the other part about it is to involve professionals. Professionals are involved. So you have somebody like myself who's a licensed professional engineer. I'm not going to put my credibility, my license, anything on the line for somebody.
So you're taking liability if they don't cancel.
Sure. Yeah. If that's what the board sees as necessary. Yeah. That sort of thing is very, very common. In my experience, it's not common for farms. I haven't seen it for farms. I've seen it for commercial where the risk is high. For occasional event use parking where the risk is really low. This would seem to be very unusual to me.
Okay, so you're making the call on it then?
No, I'm not making any calls.
Well, you're taking.
If I were to make the call, my recommendation would be, this is a good soil management plan. And treat them like they're doing well until they've demonstrated otherwise. If they demonstrate that there's a problem, that's when I would suggest corrective measures are required. Yeah, nobody's hands been caught in a cookie jar here.
I had a question about one of the shutdown requirements. So it's on page 9, section 5.2.3. It says parking limitations shall occur when rainfall exceeds half an inch in 24 hours.
Yep.
I just don't understand the time period around that. So like, for example, if it rained half an inch 2 weeks before the event, no one would care. If it rained half an inch the day before, that might be an issue. So I just like, how am I supposed to interpret that?
Yeah, I think that's important to understand. And so there's a term in ag called field capacity, and field capacity is just how much water soil retains after a period of time. Essentially, when it's the balance between gravity and the soil retention. And for a sandy loam, which is a fairly well-drained soil, it's typically 1 to 2 days for field to achieve field capacity. And so under section 5.2 that you mentioned, there's a mention about that. But so if rainfall exceeded half an inch in 24 hours, you would then have to wait 1 to 2 days. And then at that point, you would, all these other things would kick in as well. They don't kick in, they're always present. But if you were to see soil running, it's essentially able to that.
Okay.
When soils are wet, they behave very, very different than when they're dry. When they're dry, you can drive on them. They're not an issue. Or when they're frozen, so that's a problem. But
Okay. And I think another important aspect is for everyone following these rules or overseeing these rules is agreeing on the gold standard reference for where we're going to get that measurement of rain. Is it a cup at the Vernons? Is it or like who?
Yeah, it's a great point. And it's not unusual in a plan to identify where the closest monitoring station is. So I don't know. We could explore that.
I anticipate somebody saying in town, it rained half an inch, they can't have an event for 2 days or something like that.
Right. Well, and yeah, and remember, it's half an inch in 24 hours. And we're field capacity when too. So I can imagine a condition where we rain half an inch in the peak growing season, where field capacity you've reached in a day. Right, because peak growing season, I mean, that half an inch didn't even make it in this ground. It got sucked up immediately. So it's all of these criteria. The most important is the running of the field capacity. But to your point, Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And what my recommendation would be trust the limits. I mean, we have to trust them on a lot of ways. You know, they could be, you could have a tractor out back and dumping 55-gallon drums in the ground. You know, any neighbor could be doing that, right? There's no reason to not trust them. So from my perspective, if we want to know what that half-inch measure is, just have them log the rainfall as it goes, and they're very easy. You just have a rain gauge in the backyard, and they're cumulative, so you can see what that would be. You can look at the before and after. Although, sorry, I know you had a question here, but the other way to do it, which has some benefits but has some disadvantages, is you could do the closest local rain gauge. That way somebody else could check it. But the problem with that is proximity, right? So 5 miles away, the weather may not be the same as here. So, my recommendation would be, they're good stewards of the land. That's the whole point of the conservation easement, and would be to have them have a rain gauge, and they can record that. It can be part of their annual reporting.
I have two questions related to this conversation. One is, you mentioned the annual reporting, and I assume you mean the easement monitoring that we're required to do.
No,
No.
I'm not getting into that. Not that that's not relevant, but that's not. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay.
Yeah, so what I'm referring to is, thank you. Let's see, so what I'm referring to is section 5.5 on page 10, called annual monitoring and corrective action. And the term I can remember was adaptive management. And so all this is that at the end of each of the seasons, an observational summary shall be performed. And we could, it's not in here, but we could go so far as even just create a real simple, easy annual inspection worksheet. When I do this for residential or commercial or industrial sites, we have check sheets. Someone signs it and date it, and it's very easy to do. But so you have your list of criteria that you would look at, and then if an item is identified as being deficient, you have a corrective action. And what we're talking about is not unique. So if you build a site and you have to get a construction general permit through the EPA, you have a SWIP, and then when that stormwater pollution protection plan, if there's an element that's identified for being a problem, every one of those is a trigger for a corrective action. And that's what we're doing.
Okay.
And that would be an easy addition, probably a really good one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And
Yeah.
the other question I had is, you cited up front the number of events, and I know the Vernons, for a variety of reasons, have chosen to operate at less than their approved event number. And that probably is an important consideration in soil health, et cetera. So since their approved number of events is significantly higher, how do we handle that? Because that seems like a potential area of concern, that if we had a kind of normally wet year and they wanted to increase the number of events, we might they might have to cancel events, or other things might happen. And so how do we put that into the management plan?
So it's a great question, and let me try and answer and see if it meets your satisfaction. My belief is that it's actually, that's in the shutdown criteria would address that, and the annual monitoring would address it. And so here's why. So you're right, it's way under the numbers. But there's supposed to be, the term I can't remember earlier, adaptive management. If you are identifying problems, so repeated rutting, any of the measures, standing water, the vegetation is beginning to stress. So, the easiest one to always look at is vegetation and erosion, because that's the canary in the coal mine. If the vegetation can't grow, there's something wrong with the soils, and then you get the bases that come in. So that's a feedback loop from there, and that's the whole idea of adaptive management. And so that's sort of self-correcting. And beyond that, if you're actually talking about changing their permit criteria, that's something that Amy would need to speak to, because I don't know what that would look like. But in terms of the parking management plan, I believe you're covered there, because it's in that whole loop. If you saw reasons for problems, the shutdown criteria kick in.
And we as a conservation commission could raise that, I guess, and then this might be more for you, Amy, but
Yeah.
So I do want to point out good instructions. So when you go back to 2024, in the report, page 3, there were 30 events. And 50 catered and 5 music events are allowed. So still not there, but much bigger than, for example, this year where they're 12. So they have had years where they have a lot more events. Soil's fine. No indication of any problems at all. Lots of indications of worries about soil health, but no indications of any actual problems.
yeah, but that's like a 1 point time and depends on the weather that year and
Yep.
what it was and so forth.
Yeah, I understand. You're talking about like that perfect storm, wet year, lot of events, well-attended events, every single one of them.
Right.
Right. So I'm not gonna repeat what Rob said, because the plan does have a scaffolding approach to manage those concerns and avoid them before they happen. But this would be something, in my belief, that the commission would refer to either the select board or the planning board. Because now we're talking about a site plan approval. And that's where that 50 event limit comes from.
Right.
So I think that's probably what we want to talk about. I also don't think that this is anything that happens, overnight. This is something that I'm hoping, we, meaning the farm and the commission, have been collaborating on for years and will continue to collaborate on for years, such that as the commission, between these annual reportings, ever has that kind of concern, you're gonna let the farm, before we get to the point of, we would like to amend your site plan approval, because we might not like to have the farm site plan approval amended, given yes, it's their livelihood. So I think more continued communication on that.
Thank you.
A point of clarification, that chart says number of music events. Does that include all events or is that just
No.
strictly music
No, there's
events?
lots of different events that don't implicate any of these parking.
So those would,
If the school bus arrives on a weekday morning with one school bus of children and parks in that area in front of the farm stand, that's an event. That's agritourism. That has nothing to do with this parking area.
We keep talking, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I have a question on the parking. So I know this has been, I've been on the commission for about a year now. As long as I've been here, fighting for parking on the easement has been the thing. Clearly, as you point out, there's a livelihood factor there. So there's a desire to have events. The one thing that struck me in reading the report is the 30, so I know you mentioned it's mostly pictures, it's 10 pages of content. There are 36 occurrences of parking being referred to as occasional
Yes.
parking, which was very conspicuous. And so I guess with the desire, again, that the community has had some heated discussions and lots of debate, and the desire is to hold events. How is it occasional? The other factor, one other piece that I was noticed, and I guess this is a point of clarification as well, is you started out by saying, and I think it's in the report as well, that parking will go from spring to fall. And I think the report actually says 5 months out of the year. So bear with me one moment. I'm just trying to look at the specific that I jotted down. So 5 months out of the year, then the report says, so agritourism activities occur approximately 5 months a year, assuming spring to fall. Then it says the plan recommends that the fields remain in primary agricultural use for grazing during the non-event season. So are we saying, so November through April, is that grazing season? Is that when you would primarily, I'm imagining you have snow cover during most of those months. So I'm curious, I know we talked before about land management and rollover and all of that. If the 5 months, as I understand it, from UNH, that grazing months are typically late spring into fall, which is also parking season, will the land ever be grazed on?
So I think
And then the parking piece, I'm wondering, why are we fighting for parking if it's only occasional, but it's 5 months with up to 300 guests, with up to 50 events?
right.
So there's some conflicting, I'm having trouble reconciling what we're after here.
So the use of the word occasional, it is conspicuous, and I don't know what other word we could use. It's not entirely seasonal, so we didn't choose the word seasonal. We could have,
5 months.
could have called it overflow event parking, I would think was the other word I was thinking about. Overflow. Yeah.
So I think it's important to emphasize the issue in sort of maybe hours, and also in consideration with the animals. When it's the quote unquote agritourism event season, that doesn't mean it's not the livestock season. So, again, thinking about the Lowe's development, right? Lowe's, Walmart, they're open. I don't do a lot of very early morning or late night shopping, but I don't know, 7 a.m., 10 a.m. until 8 p.m., 10 p.m., 7 days a week. The agritourism events are no days a week, or 1 day a week, or maybe 3 days a week.
But
During
Lowe's
the
is
day.
Observation lanes, though.
During the day, they are 2 hours long, 3 hours long, or 4 hours. They're not sunrise to past sunset. So it is a fraction of a day for a fraction of some weeks for less than half of the month. And in those times where there is not an agritourism event, those fields can be and is grazed by livestock.
In between.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's
So
fair,
it's
but I
not-
would say I wouldn't
It's not a.
trivialize the parking on the easement in terms of, because what we're saying is we're parking a lot of vehicles on a piece of land that's in protection. So I think the Lowe's comparison is probably not a fair one. But I would also say.
I'm trying to distinguish them.
But I think what Chris is saying is hundreds of vehicles simultaneously driving or one path is a lot different than rotational grazing.
Agreed. Yeah, we're not saying that rotational grazing is anything like parking vehicles. We're saying that the vehicles are parked for mere couple hours for some weeks, 0 days per week. And then in a maximum week, 2 days a week, maybe 3 days a week. For less than half of the year. So it's.
Currently at twice the PSI of anything else encountered on the farm.
No, it's similar. You said similar because
No, it depends on the.
Almost twice.
If it's.
It's almost 2 times.
Sedan, similar. You're driving your Tesla truck, it's heavier. Yeah, or more pressure, yes, it's a better technical.
It's also hundreds of them simultaneously in the same lane.
That's not how the events operate.
Yeah, you have driving lanes. It's in the report.
Yeah, they're not simultaneous. It's more of like a staggered, I might arrive an hour after you. Mhm. Yeah.
And the use of drive lanes was actually a practice recommended by UCS because it helps you control particular areas, and it also helps you allow identify areas if you want to rest them. So that is one of the pieces that's identified in establishing particular drive lanes, et cetera. And if there was a concern, this is an example of adaptive management, if it was observed that there was rutting or otherwise, you can shut off particular areas, or you can rest particular areas, or change traffic patterns in that as well. In the same way that you would rescue crops or recreation as well.
Going back to the word, occasional, would regularly scheduled seasonal events be appropriate?
Sure. Yeah, I think that would be fine. So, yeah.
I noticed in the conclusion, there's an anticipation that Waterstone will handle the implementation and evaluation. Has that been determined?
There's no contract in place yet, but you know, it's a long time in the future. Who knows? You know, I don't know if Rob will get hit by the bus tomorrow, but if he does, we're gonna have someone else. But every anticipation is that we will have to continue to be under contract.
And what would that implementation and evaluation look like?
So the way I'm imagining it would be, it would just create an inspection worksheet, and this is a very common piece. We design and permit different best management practices now through the state. This is usually a requirement of that. So if this were again like a commercial or residential site, that is fairly common. So we just prepare a worksheet, and it has all the major inspection elements on it. There's a yes, no, and then there's a need, notes, and the need for a corrective measure. There's a signature, and depending on how the town wants to handle it, some towns require submittals, some towns require you just keep them on hand for audit. And in my experience, most towns require you to keep them on hand for audit, simply because of resources.
This is all based on visual observation and generalized assumptions.
I wouldn't call it generalized assumptions, but yes, I would call it about professional judgment.
No scientific or engineering reporting whatsoever.
Oh, yeah, scientific and engineering report.
Oh,
Yeah,
you have some.
PhD, engineer and scientist. So yeah, we consider it scientific and engineering report.
But with samples to back it up.
No, inspection monitoring that I participated on a routine basis, and O&M plans that I've read don't usually have monitoring involved. They have inspection. So there's this sort of tiered approach. If you identify problems, that triggers all sorts of other corrective measures. So for example, if an inspection identified, a 500-gallon well spill that hadn't been reported, there would be phone calls that would be made that would trigger sampling, all sorts of things, which does happen. I was at a site recently where we discovered a buried debris pit, and it triggered all the state requirements. It's reported, it's monitored, it's disposed of properly. That's what you get when you have professionals involved.
When was this visual observation done?
This one?
Yeah.
It's in there.
Yeah, I don't recall. I think I was hired, can't remember, not that long ago, a month and a half ago. And it's probably within a week of that. So that's days today, days to 18th. I would guess it was probably May 1st or thereabouts.
We submitted the.
Oh, right. So it was probably the week prior to that, probably the 22nd or 23rd then.
So no recent parking on it then,
I'm sorry.
Not since last season.
right? So no parking on it since last season.
Bear in mind the chronology that we're landing in. We had the whole discussion with the Conservation Commission in October and November. And we were headed into winter, the agritourism season was over. So that would have been even a worse time for evaluation. So we timed this specifically so that they could get a professional in the field when the field looked like a field and not a cross-country skiing rink. And so this was the first and earliest available time to get a professional in the field once the pasture had come up again. So, yeah.
So maybe on the plan, then we put it as a fall inspection then after the events.
And it does list that. It says at the end of the agritourism season. So yeah, that would probably, yeah, exactly. And you're right, I mean, it has to be done when you can actually observe impacts. When there's a foot of snow on the ground, it's not gonna work. Yeah. And that's fairly common. And then by having somebody sign it, I mean, I'll be clear though, inspections are not always done by professional engineers. A lot of times that's just sort of anybody qualified. So I'm not trying to suggest that I'm the only one that can do this. But when you have somebody who's got a license who signs something, it's important.
As you were thinking about ways to mitigate, use of the soil, did you ever contemplate alternative parking locations or like?
It didn't. It didn't. And I think that's because my understanding of the permit was that they were directed to park in this particular area. But I suppose that could be done. It was not done as part of that, honestly. But that's something that could be done. You just look at the soils and the site and access and all of that. This place makes a lot of sense to do it from the standpoint of access.
Okay, I guess I was saying, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
It's just to follow up on Caleb's question. I appreciate your background and your knowledge on this. So you mentioned, you would create some sort of checklist, you'd evaluate annually. Is it cost prohibitive to do something like infiltration testing, testing something more measurable for impaction or hydrocarbon accumulation? Are there tests for that? And is the reason I know I think that there need to be some kind of visual trigger to kind of take it to the next step for something like that? But is it because it's cost prohibitive, or is it time-wise, or I'm just curious as to why you wouldn't on a conservation easement sort of, it seems like a lot of the best practice to have something scientific to back it up. I'm sure you would observe something, you obviously have a background and a keener eye than I do, but it seems like that's much more subjective and there's no science behind it to Caleb's point. So is there any reason that you wouldn't do something like that if just on an annual basis?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Part of it is if you recall the early part I mentioned about the NRCS, right? So we're basically trying to build this, develop something within the guidance of how NRCS practices work. And if we were in a site where there was a high risk potential, I think I would agree with that, and I think it'd be called for. But in a low risk potential, which I mean, I do all sorts of different kinds of projects from industrial oil refineries, things like that. And this is in the category of low risk. It's so low risk that it wouldn't even register on a lot of things. And just give you an idea, like, so a residential street might be, 50 to 100 vehicles a day, right? We're talking 300 vehicles max, maybe 10 times a year. So we're at a lower risk than a residential road. And we don't have people sampling the catch basins of residential roads that have tractor trailers and all these other things going through. It's not that it's unimportant. It's just balancing risk with resource. And they're absolutely important pieces. And I would say in the realm of science and engineering, we have qualitative and quantitative. And when I hear you say no engineering, no science, I think what you're saying is there's no quantitative, right? But qualitative is observation, and that is still a form of science and engineering. Give you a good example. I do wetland delineations all the time. So wetland delineations have three primary things, right? Soil type, we have plants, and we have hydrology. And to do a true wetland delineation, you go out there, you do soil plugs, you look for the grain, soil coloring, the redox and morphic conditions. You don't need to do any of that if you know what you're doing. Just look at the plant type. The plant tells you everything. Am I looking at a plant stress? Am I looking at a plant that is an obligate wetland species? Is it an upland species? If I have an upland species, I know it's not a wetland. but we have these varying levels of confirmation. So what I would say to you is that if there were reasons to believe otherwise, we could trigger all sorts of other things. But the qualitative evaluation is powerful and then can trigger all sorts of other pieces. So so what I hear you saying is the Conservation Commission is how do we manage risk? So if you wanted to manage risk, I think what you would probably be best doing is looking at the annual reporting and identifying if there's concerns that should be followed up on, and if the corrective measures are being managed appropriately.
I appreciate that response.
You know, just clarify. So just look for records in your report, and I apologize. You should add this in the future, but the site visit is not referenced in there. It was April 14th, 2026. Yeah. And then, I also wanted to say, just by analogy to something we all experience in our everyday life, the need for quantitative, infiltration testing and whatnot. It's akin to when we go to the doctors and you graduate through the level of diagnostics. So there might first be a basic physical exam. That's the qualitative. The physical exam might lead to a screening. That's sort of like the lower level diagnostics. Those diagnostics might lead to you need to now go see the specialist. That's like the heavy duty infiltration testing. So that first tier, that qualitative, hasn't indicated even the need for the screening. So that's where we're at. And the annual monitoring is the continued qualitative scientific and engineering assessment, which we're on board for.
I keep bringing that up only because obviously we're not all PhDs in soil science, but NRCS, it's free to do the soil test. And even if you ran it through UNH, it's $25. I'll give the $25 for the soil. You know what I mean? So it's for us who aren't, PhDs on it, it could put everybody's, it could just squash everything. Here you go. So it's great. It's a free test at the request of the farm. Yeah. And then that eliminates a lot of questions for
I mean, again, in my mind, where we start with this is an NRCS-based plan. And the NRCS-based conservation plans really focus on farms are disappearing, right? We need to recognize the stress that we're putting on local farms. It's not an easy profession. And the standard that we're holding them to is not that standard development. It's just not. Water quality regulations, for example, Clean Water Act, believe it or not, does not apply to agriculture. You do not apply Clean Water Act requirements to farms and forestry. You just don't. It's an exemption because it's a recognized distinction here. And so I recognize that the Conservation Commission is used to seeing a lot of things like residential, commercial, industrial pieces. And that is the context that we evaluate a lot under, but that's not the criteria that we're operating under.
I can appreciate what you're saying completely about the farm, but I would also say for us here, our purpose as a Conservation Commission is our loyalty is to the easement.
Right.
So while, I can absolutely empathize with what's going on culturally.
Yeah.
Our role here is to make sure that we're upholding the easement.
We can't request we can't actually call and get the soil test, but any of you can.
Sure.
And it can be done, and again, it's free, it doesn't cost you anything.
But at the same time, Caleb, I think we walked the fields last fall and that grass looked super healthy to me, right? And so I looked at it and said, I don't see a lot of damage. I'm not a soil scientist. I did do some soil science in my training, so I know a little bit, but I looked at it and said, it doesn't look bad. To hear a professional say it's completely consistent with guidelines, to me says that we have an obligation, yes, to keep monitoring it. There's nothing in any of this that says that we can't check on the parking anytime there's been rain and there's an event and we want to go look and we question it and then we ask them to do more. I I understand what you're saying, but
But it
it's like
to,
overkill.
we've allowed the parking and where it's a free test, it kind of, and this is just me being skeptical on it, but why would we do the free test? Or has the test been done and shown something that we're not gonna like?
Test for what?
So,
Oil.
so what I would say,
Right, and the free test would eliminate
But
that.
test doesn't tell you anything.
Well, they do it in multiple spots, but yeah.
but so to that point, and it's funny, I mean, I completely trust your background, what you do for a living. That playing devil's advocate, I could absolutely see, and if you understood, then you probably are aware, the conversations and what's gone on with the town. And I would say that hearing Caleb bring up that point, if there's an opportunity to the other half of the town that believes, the parking on the easement was not the right way to go. If you could dispel something, because devil's advocate me would say, okay, we have somebody, while he's a professional, he's also being, paid for by a client, and skepticism can absolutely be there. So I would say that, and ultimately it's up to the commission what we need to work into the plan, but I could absolutely see that if there is a free test and it dispels everything, then no harm, no foul. So that's one side of the argument. The other is absolutely, you're a professional, you do this for a living. As you point out, you're going to be able to tell by looking at the vegetation if there's a reason to go to that next stage. Again, I would argue though, on the opposite side with the skepticism, it's no harm, no foul. It's
Well, no test is free. Just because the client or the Vernons don't have to pay for it, it's not free. So, that's number one. And it does take somebody's time, which may be theirs. So I think we need to be reasonable about what we're requesting as part of the plan, and the plan leaves us openings to change what we ask of them. I'm going to that step immediately.
I think we're exploring, discussing.
I just I'm cognizant of time. We're happy to answer any more questions. I think we've covered most of the content of the plan, of our proposed plan. I just want to go over a couple, so I think one of the new concepts we came up with tonight is to have the Vernons get a rain gauge, which I think that's fine. I think that is an important gap, half an inch says who, so it says the Vernons rain gauge. And we talked about maybe adding a checklist into the proposed plan right now. But I think we're fine tuning that would be the procedure used for future monitoring. Not just putting it into this proposed plan as like a appendix or something. Let me just see if I tracked any other new concepts for tonight. Okay, no, that's all I got. For new concepts for tonight.
Maybe changing the word occasional to
Yes, I forgot to.
regularly scheduled seasonal events.
I have this super secret code of 3 asterisks, and things I need to remember.
And you may have already recorded this, but putting the April 14th site visit date in there too.
Yes, thank you. So if there are any other edits, please let us know.
Is it also the request to do the monitoring at the end of the season?
I think that's in.
It's in there.
Okay.
That's in there.
Yeah, I did want to.
Okay. One more comment from us. But I did want to just make sure that we've touched on all of the comments from the commission. Otherwise, we'll have Rob say his final comment, and, we're here tonight, the way that the commission worded it is that you would need to approve this or satisfy the condition. Not permanently, it's sort of like for now. And then, as you said, you can come and look whenever. We'll come back with annual monitoring, we'll implement the plan. But I do see one more question or comment, and I'll have a comment for his.
I haven't been
Okay.
back there, but will the annual report that she's referring to have a check sheet?
It will.
It will, okay, so that
And then
it ought to be in there.
then I think we should answer the question on where do you want that going to stay? Is that submitted to the town? to the Concom, or is that held on site? Because there's a variety of ways that those will often go.
It goes to Comcom public file, right?
I think so.
Email it to us.
Okay.
Yes, but eventually go to the select board.
So, secondly, page 5, I think, where it talks about the 0.7 acres.
Yeah.
Could we add in there that the parking will be limited to that area? There won't be further land for the case where, they book the Rolling Stones or something like that.
Yeah.
And they have to get further in, because that would be good to know exactly what area we have.
I think Amy's gonna have to answer that, but I believe it's already limited, right?
Yeah,
It's part
it's
of the permit.
spatially limited.
But isn't it per permit, doesn't it say it shall be in the western fields?
Yeah. Right.
I don't want to say it's enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just maybe one word.
Questions, and I'm gonna take a peek at the approved site plan real quick.
Okay.
So, okay, thank you.
It's maybe in the plan, because I did list the primary conditions.
Okay. Okay. I already answered tonight.
Yeah.
Just need a second.
It's not changing anything, just typing it up.
Do you have any other questions, Tom? Because I think otherwise he wanted to make a comment, but for clarification.
Yeah, I guess I do. So we didn't talk about the scenic aspect again with the kind of.
Yes, thank you.
Control. Were you going to speak to that or?
I can, I'd be happy to.
Okay,
There is.
Yeah, we should spend a few minutes on
the scenic view. Yep. Thank you for asking. Do you want me to speak?
sure, yeah, if you have something you were going to say.
Yeah, so that would, thank you for reminding me, but don't let me forget, there was one comment I'd like, actually, do you mind if we go, if I finish just a little bit on the monitoring and then I promise to go back to the soil or the scenic view?
It's been here.
Yeah, just so we're, so, I completely understand what you're saying about monitoring. But one of the things that I'd like to put it in contextually for you, I have done a lot of monitoring. It's actually something, Allison, they've done a lot of. And one of the things we know about monitoring is if you want to be confident in your data, you take one data, you take one sample. So because the problem with it, like when you asked me earlier, why wouldn't we sample for, say, contaminants and other parts? The question would be, well, where? I mean, when we do monitoring, it's very specific, and it's really difficult to know where. Would we put a single well downstream? Would we do under every car stall? Do we do it based on visual observations again? Like, oh, I see a spot, I'm gonna go underneath there.
It's best practice. If you're asked to do that,
Yeah.
you see some kind of a trigger.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah, but I mean, this is typical best practice when I'm providing that. I mean, it really is. But so what I wanted to tell you is that even if we did a soil compaction sample, the question is where, how many, what time of year? And so you'd obviously say, okay, maybe travel lane, but is it the same spot every year? Because if you go 5 feet to the right, your value can be very different. So typically you're taking tripling so that you have an average, because one might be off, one might be there, or maybe cluster. I mean, I'm just telling you, this monitoring itself.
So I guess that's one question. I think I had heard several people, Amy mentioned these things occur slowly over time.
Right.
Is there a best practice over time? You may not see, to your point, if you have 5 events with cars and you do testing, it's probably going to be much more variability. If you're doing this for, increasing events over a longer duration, you're likely to, I would imagine, you're more likely.
No question, but what I'm telling you is that monitoring is just not terribly simple. I mean, we've learned that about the Great Bay. If you follow the Great Bay stuff, I mean, first there was 1 sample, then there was 5 samples, and then they're everywhere. And now it's seasonal, in tide, out of tide, 4 times a year with monitoring songs for real time. I mean, it is what we realize is that every time you answer something, you raise more questions. Not that data is not important, but it's rarely as simple as we think.
But I think that, to your point, I think some degree, and I can't speak for everybody, some degree of oversight and a plan with something measurable, quantitative, qualitative, that leads us to have some degree of stewardship
Okay, so you know what I actually think, so I like that. What the easy piece for that would be, we could put in a visual assessment. And this is totally qualitative, a very common thing you do is you put a plat down. This is how you measure plant density. You can put a plat down and just measure like, and there's actually a mention of this. I think I can't remember if it's 10 or 20% lack of vegetative cover. And it could be those sorts of things, like what is the percent of vegetative cover that's missing, or things like that. So you'd be able to see over time, oh, this year we look like full covers. The next year, like we had 10% loss, the next year, 20% loss. So
Kind of a fixed point.
it would give us a data point. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. And that would be very easy. Because we a lot of our inspections have that, you know, how much sediment has accumulated in this retention pond, as an example. And the trigger condition is when it gets to a certain depth. Okay. So, but we're going to see percent vegetative cover
Loss.
lost. Anything else come to mind on that? So percent vegetative cover loss, the opposite of that is erosion. The other obvious one is concentrated runoff. Do we see concentrated runoff? That is one of the biggest measures. You know, you look at vegetation, how healthy are plants, and then you look at concentrated runoff. And so, yeah. Okay. So, we said enough few times to move the scenic. Yeah. Thank you. So the scenic view part was addressed in the requirements for the management plan. And so and the verdants have worked on that. So the simple piece is that they cleared a significant section along the road, a little over 400 feet, and basically kind of maintaining the historic agricultural view of the fields and the watershed below. And so
What was cleared, just to clarify?
just the understory. So kind of the common stuff, you have the big trees that are there, you have the rock wall. And previously you wouldn't really have seen through there because there would have been a low and a mid-story that had grown up in between there. So now you have, as you drive through there, you can see in the nice rolling ag fields down into the Piscataqua watershed below. And that view had not been there previously. Or had been there, but had grown up. And so that too is listed in there as the maintenance of of the scenic aspect.
It's ongoing, it's going to remain in that state. There's not additional plantings being taken place or anything like that.
Correct. And no
Not in there.
fencing or anything planned for that. That's right.
Let me ask on the scenery, as you come into the farm from the east, you see a historic building there. Can you bring that up? What exactly is that that's being?
Blacksmith shop.
Blacksmith.
It's the blacksmith community conference store. And then there's a carriage house, we recommend use as an office space.
But it's a historical building and. To some degree.
Building, it's not.
I mean,
What I'm saying is that is untouched from what I could tell over decades, really. And then, so it's really not part of the easement, but I'm just saying that's part of the overall scenic view that I think we need to clarify is there's really three sections of the Vernon Farm.
Yeah, we can add that in, we can add references to those and for those of you that are listening to the audio, I'm making air quotations with my fingers. Because these two buildings that we're talking about are historic in that way. They're not, on the National Register of Historic Places. Probably they could be because they are of that nature. But one of them has been repurposed to the farm's farm store. And one of them has been repurposed to the farm's working office. But they are beautiful, small, historic structures, colonial. I mean, I'm not sure to guess, but not one of us knows for sure. But that is part of the viewscape as you approach. And then of course there's the, working farm landscape aspect as well, which is part of the vital unknowns of the farm. And I do have your answer on the limitation on parking. So in the report, the report we're presenting tonight on page 4, it restates 2 of the conditions of the farm's 2022 site plan approval. And Mr. Great Memory, Robert Racine, pulled up from memory that condition number 4, which is all about how they manage the safety and the flow of the parking, does limit to the western field. So parking for events occurs in the distant fields, currently the western fields. So there are no vehicles being operated in or around guests as the event is ongoing. And what you don't have here, there's condition number 4, but you don't have the entire site plan approval printed here. And so these conditions, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the other several, are all under the header of, site plan is approved, conditioned on the following. So these are all limits placed on that site plan approval. The other thing is, for those of you that have been to the farm, first of all, the farm has no desire to have vehicles parked anywhere else. But second of all, logistically, there really is nowhere else to park. There are hills, sort of hillocks, and large trees, and their residents and their neighbors' residents, very close to anywhere else that would conceivably be used for parking. So for legal reasons that we just talked about in the site plan approval, and for these logistical reasons, this western field location is the location. All right, any other last comments or edits, thoughts, but otherwise, as you can tell, we put a lot of time and effort into this. The farm arguably is, no more motivated than anyone else to keep the soil healthy. Because again, it's their livelihood. They are uniquely motivated to keep the soil healthy, to keep their farm going. So they're in it to win it. They're taking this very seriously, as they have for years. So I think this is a good plan and I hope you approve it, but definitely any other questions and comments, we're here.
I guess I have one general question, then we have a comment from the audience. So we determined parking is allowed. This plan overall says, is anything going to be ruined by the parking? It's like trying to control that, trying to keep tabs on it, and tabs will happen throughout season and especially at the end of the year, end of the season. So we're at a point where we see the plan. A lot of it's perfect. We need to add some tweaks that we've listed. So what's the state right now? We would ask for these revisions to happen. At our June meeting, we would approve it or not approve it.
Well, are you asking me the question? Because I'd love to give you what we would propose would be the answer.
And so I guess my question is, are we stopping events by not approving this? Or do we kind of recap the changes that we want included and say approve with an amendment tonight and that's it?
That's what we would prefer. I don't think that these changes are complicated.
They're not big.
I think we can list them out again.
Yeah.
In the very off chance that they miss the mark and never see you again, and don't give you the amended plan, you know what to do, but that's not going to happen. And I don't know if between now and a month from now, we'll be holding up events.
It's the first farm to table dinner, music band is June 27th.
Okay, so likely not, but keep in mind for business planning, they're not going to be doing the final planning the week before. They're working on it now.
But the plan is for maintenance of you're already approved to park, so I guess I'm not understanding how we.
That was my question. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
I
Like,
would
are we stopping?
with Rob's suggested changes to some of the testing. I prefer to see a final piece. I don't think again, you're approved for parking so many vehicles in a defined location. That's from the planning board, so I don't think the remediation or the management
Yeah.
plan.
We would have no objection to receiving approval tonight, as long as the consensus of the board is that this is an approvable plan with these changes. And we would like to have that consensus expressed tonight because of the second thing I'm about to say, which is we love to see you, but we would like to not see you next month.
Yeah, I think
This is a time-consuming and costly endeavor. And so we would like to have it be a submission, as discussed, here you go, and you can act on it. And then that would be that.
yeah, that would be the cleaner option. It's a paperwork exercise. You don't have to come back and read.
Quick, simple question. How many events do get canceled brain wise or field saturated? Is there kind of a count or a ballpark on that?
I think there was 1 year, maybe like in 2022 where.
Downpours in July. Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't have an indoor space park, so it's an outdoor activity, and obviously, people aren't gonna be happy coming over the park. It's raining and eating outside.
Yeah.
And tables and like.
So on average, there's not a lot then.
I'm sorry.
There's not a lot that gets postponed. Canceled.
Saturday that we have on the list of rents, if we were dead. That,
Yeah.
that would be my hope. Typically, our protocol for canceling an event, if we see that it's looking for sure, like it's gonna be rain, is like at least 24 hours in advance. If it's really, really obvious by the radar. And that's for a variety of reasons, the caterer, musicians, and also the police detail. If we don't cancel the police detail on time, then we're still having to pay the Newfields police department. So there is incentive for us to be thoughtful about the weather and how we're going to impact our events. And we're also running a professional, working farm with agritourism events that are really loved by the community as a whole. And so we're trying to make sure that it's a great experience for all.
Comments from the audience?
Thank you. Well, absolutely. I don't know what question you guys got with some, thank you. Just a couple things. I really appreciate this shutdown criteria. I definitely see a lot of potential. So this who said if that is rain, who checked the soil. I think that there's a little bit of ambiguity in there that's going to be difficult. So one thing I'm saying about rain gauge, if I control rain gauge and it just goes automatically, sure, please, I went to the weather station, maybe that goes on the down.
I would just push back. There's been times keeping.
Okay. Just because I think that you're gonna get people say that 0.49 inches rain, people say 0.55 inches rain. You need a neutral location. You need a neutral location that's trusted. And as you know, in New England, we get these big thunderstorms. You can get an inch of rain, and there's a really fun stuff. So just think about that. I think there needs to be, this needs to be in the plan, but I think there needs to be a mutual ground station for the third party. In terms of the monitoring, so monitoring is done in fall by professional youth people. We do have our own site monitoring, so Ariana contacted me. She's going to go out and do that monitoring in June. So she should contact me pretty soon. We've had this conversation yesterday. And one of the things she is going to do is resurvey that line. So we will know exactly where the porta potties are. Not you were there, but we're going to resurvey that line so we know where the porta potties are. But if there's a clear criteria and we wanted to, I don't think this goes in. I don't think this is your responsibility. We could choose to have her do that. So we could choose to have it done sort of early in the season and late in the season. So that would be sort of on us, but that's something we can do if we're interested. I don't remember, I didn't see any plan, does it restrict parking just to cars and passenger vehicles? Is there something that says school buses all day long and the?
It does not, it's a great question, should be added. Yeah, you're right, thank you. Can you take note of that? You're right. Right, thank you.
Over parking, I really feel the plan to just have a paragraph that talks about alternative parking. CPA 199 does suggest that you talk about no action alternative. So I think in that case, parking is not the direction we're going in. And I realize that we're not really doing a plan exactly as described there. But I think that the question of why there, and I understand it's related to the site conditions, but why isn't the word else awesome? I mean, I can just see a paragraph that
Describe why it is where it is.
why isn't the word else? So the conditions are, in the Western Field, doesn't say it has to be there. It says it has to be in the distant fields where nobody's gonna get run over or, people. And it says currently the Western Fields. Why would it not be, some?
Can you respond to that? It's actually,
Let's see.
yes, please.
It'll be quicker. Okay, you promise. I'm very good. So one suggestion that has come up is QB Road. Just think about that. And I think that you're gonna get days when it pours on Friday and people on Saturday. And criteria says you have to shut down and you're gonna really wish you had done it right. So I think that there is some benefit to you guys and thinking about that. And it's not uneasy. It's not on us.
Sorry, we can only hear a little bit about from what you said, but I think we mentioned Cuba Road is the overflow before. Did you mention that? Yeah.
What I was just saying there is, I think that it is deeply in the Vernon's interest to look for parking that is not unreasonable.
Yeah, there's no cancellation of events.
Right, it would be uneasy, so it would come under this criteria. So. Okay. So.
It was really hard to hear.
So I'm going to respond to public comment. The public is recommending that the farm consider, and the farmer will consider. But the public says, don't put this in the plan. You don't need to put this in the plan. A neutral location for the rain gauge. We take that to heart, we will consider that. But when we do that, we will consider these micro events. And we will consider whether we can find that sweet spot of a neutral location that's also close to the farm. A digital auto logging, an auto logger grain gauge might be an additional layer or an alternative approach. So the farm will consider that as well. Noted about RM's site visit. Yes, we'll restrict school buses from the Western Field. And yes, we'll add an alternatives paragraph noting that the no action alternative is not an option here. And what I stated earlier about why we're not going to park, behind Verna's house, next to the neighbor's house, where it's hilly and treey. And I think what we'll do is we'll just make a non-binding statement that gives the Vernons the discretion to consider establishing off-site parking alternatives in the future.
Did I just one briefly, as to why the parking is here, aside from the site plan approval condition, soil mount, this is actually the best soils on site. It doesn't speak to possibility of offsets that people vote.
Yeah.
But if you were to park on site, this is actually the best spot, just because soil type and topography, those two things work.
May I make an attempt at the list of edits? So just going from the top. So the Vernons will add, these are all things that Brian is going to add into a second version of the proposed plan. The Vernons will measure the rainfall with a rain gauge. We will consider adding into the plan, committing to a digital auto logging rain gauge. Outside of the written plan, we will consider where the rain gauge will be located. We will change the word occasional, as in parking occasionally or occasional parking, to regularly scheduled seasonal parking or parking for regularly scheduled seasonal migratories. We will add in the date of the site visit, which was April 14th, 2020. We'll add in that the annual reporting will be accomplished by emailing it to the Conservation Commission. We'll add in 2 quantitative data points. 1, vegetative cover loss, and 2, the presence or absence of concentrated runoff. We will add in the presence of the 2 historic buildings with a brief descriptor. We will add in that school buses are not permitted in Western Field where agritourism parking occurs. And we will add in a paragraph analyzing the alternatives to the current parking status quo and why the parking in the Western Field is the chosen option. Anything else?
Yes, well, actually not.
Well, sure.
I want that first.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Cool. Is now.
I think so, yeah. We're doing the final ironing.
Yeah, thank you. So this is important. It's important to do this because it's some clarity to this, and your point was really about clarity. So one point of lack of clarity here, potential for, let's just be clear, so that the shutdown criteria. One of them says that rainfall exceeds half an inch in 24 hours. Okay. But we also have running by tires exceeds 2 inches and soils are at or above field capacity. So there could be a condition where you would have rainfall exceeding half an inch in 24 hours and neither running wet of tires or field capacity exists.
I'm really seeing one, you're seeing 3.
And then, yes. Yes. And that's why I'm bringing this up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not getting that.
Right, because, for example, half an inch of rain in 24 hours during peak growing season. To me, what that says is it would trigger concern. And now you are to go out and make sure that the rutting doesn't exceed 2 inches. And the soils are at above field capacity. So I think there's probably some regulation that needs to happen there. So what I would suggest, Allison's again, but what I would suggest is that something in your motion says, administrative approval or future board approval and review of what that language is. Because why that's important is why it's important. Rainfall is right. It could be an intense rainstorm.
Yeah.
It could be a very gradual rainstorm.
Right, and yeah, just to elaborate, you have a half an inch of rain on, May 1st in 3 hours. That's very different than like what you said, you have a half an inch in 24 hours.
Right. In a conversation about monitoring, the question often is when do you measure that? So in the world of stormwater management, we don't monitor, we don't measure it on a day. It is by event, so that event often spans a period of time, so that's usually why it's happening in 24 hours. But when it ends, like, so, this is just so in the details, but you want clarity, right? Usually we say 4 to 6 hours of intermittent rain designates the next storm event. Are we getting that level?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, I will come up with that, because this is criteria, it's in manuals.
Yeah.
We have this.
Yep,
We can do that.
Yep.
Yeah.
okay. So,
Can I just throw in on that? If you wanted to use it, there's actually, I just looked up real quick, there's a registered rain monitor here in Newfields.
There is.
Yeah, it's
See, as good as any.
picking up Allen way, there's actually 2 here in Newfields you can go off of that are registered.
Sounds great.
So if you're, like you brought up, like people, you know, in town bringing it up, there's 2 of them registered here in town.
It's like weather underground or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah, so, yeah, we'll make sure that it's either that or something equivalent of.
when is the next regularly scheduled meeting?
The 18th.
And with this last edit discussed, is the board still comfortable doing just administrative only approval?
I think so, yep.
Okay, all right. So then that would be the last change would be to tighten the stoppage criteria on page 9.
Yes.
And apologies, it's the 15th of June is the third Monday, 15th.
I just wanted to make sure you were monthly. I wasn't mistaken that you were every week.
No, we're monthly, thank you.
Apology not needed, but accepted. And to the commission, are there any other, did I miss any edits?
Nope.
Think of, okay. So if the board can just, you know, as I said, we'd really like to have that consensus on the record tonight, and you're not making a motion. Unless you want to make a motion to approve subject to submission, but I don't think that's what we discussed. Then we would be comfortable making the edits, submitting it, and leave it to your action in June. So if you want to poll your board or your commission mates, that would be really
Got
helpful.
another
We got a public comment.
comment.
The public just wanted to say that one of the other criteria was linking this very close to the food production, and I do notice that your advertising has changed and you're now listing dinner events with music, so pointing that out.
Okay.
Thank you.
So is everybody generally comfortable with that direction of updating the plan, doing the review without their presence next month?
Yes.
Okay. Yep, you're good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you for your time.
Really appreciate the conversation very much.
Thank you.
And all the members of the public. That's right.
3 or 4 viewers out there.
Yeah.
We like coming to 5 meetings. Yeah. Lots.
Yeah, no.
Oh, Tom told them not to come because we wouldn't be discussing it.
Good night, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right.
You should stay in the crowd.
So it's
I'm next.
let's have the treasurer's report.
Treasurer's report. As I shared with all of you, the current conservation account balance as of the end of April is $75,653.91. An increase of $225.01 from the previous month. The current value of the value of the current use account as of the 30th of April was $21,770.79. an increase of 64.72 cents. And the current interest rate as of the 30th was 3.629%. Nothing else new and no other items came through other than the invoice we'll talk about later.
Comments? And we acknowledge, accept the treasurer's report?
A second.
Okay.
I,
Minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. I reviewed them. I'm okay with them. Other people, you want to look at them?
Look great.
You're doing it, each one separately or all three?
No, we're gonna do them all.
Okay, so I move that, we accept the minutes from April 20th, May 7th, and March 18th. I have the
I second.
March 16th, sorry.
Yeah, 16.
Aye.
So just a comment for the next chair, one thing we could consider doing is consent agenda. Where basically that stuff all just goes in paper, you read it, and all we do is we say, hey, anyone have any questions or comments on this consent agenda, and it's just one vote, so. Okay, officer elections. I know it's late, but we're not gonna stop that one. So we've got chair, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer. I guess are there anybody want to speak up and volunteer?
Are they all up for real?
I mean, yeah, everybody's, basically once a year, we re-elect officers. So it's not like terms.
I'm willing to stay on and actually eager to stay on as treasurer because I feel like I'm just getting to know what's going on. So I'll just put that out there. Anybody is dying to be treasurer, speak now.
I'm not willing to be chair. I am willing to be vice chair. I could be secretary if someone else is willing to be vice chair.
And I am not one for the limelight, so.
Well, you've done such a nice job. with
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Now Brett, his face is turning.
Yeah.
He's been out in the sun with me.
Yeah. There's a vacancy with the secretary. I've been taking care of the data on the drives. I'm good with doing that job, so I would be okay with filling that position,
What position?
the secretary position,
I
as
would
long as I don't have to take notes.
Vice chair.
Ooh, competition for vice chair. Here we go.
Vice chair or secretary. I mean, honestly, I think we have a good group. I would not take chair for numerous reasons, but one of which is just in that part of life right now where everything is just travel with work, and kids in college and high school. So I wouldn't do it justice, but I would be as vice chair or secretary, wherever the cards fall. I mean, it sounds like we have interest in those. It's the numero uno position. So I'm kind of looking at those who haven't, 3 who haven't yet declared anything.
I will concede my secretary position to you if you gung ho about filling that.
Okay.
I think the secretary role has been needed. It's been missing, since I've been on the commission. It's an extremely important role and a lot we can do with it. So,
You had a vision for like community outreach and such.
well, and I was going to say one of the, maybe tonight we can get a committee or 2 started. And I think the committee to get going would be information outreach committee, which would tie into your technical knowledge, not necessarily the officer position for that.
Yeah.
And that would, not just you, but that'd be a committee of 3 probably. So that would cover what you're getting at a little bit with the information management. And the secretary would be very close to that role as well. But I think the outreach part, and the town is having a new website tomorrow. So it's a very good time to get our educational materials and our other public documents in a state that we can work with that new website. So I will make a motion that Chris McDade, I nominate her for treasurer position. So we can-
I would like to see if we, I mean, do we have someone who's willing to be chair?
I am willing to do it.
Yeah.
I was waiting for Tom to say that.
I'm willing, yeah,
I'm just gonna throw one thing out.
kind of last man standing, but no.
Tom, you're not pushing the meetings past 9.
Just throwing it out there.
I've been quiet.
We're not having committees tonight. It's 5 of 9.
Okay, so looks like a slate. I'm sorry, I interrupted you in the middle of your motion, but it's because I'm going to give you more fodder.
Well, I was gonna take one that was the first one.
Chris McDade to be,
Okay,
First, and then move on. We can do them all, but
go for
basically, so. I nominate Chris for the position, officer position of treasurer.
I second.
it. Favor.
Aye.
All right.
I second. I'll make a motion for Tom to be chair.
Second.
She's like,
It's some ways.
Hallelujah.
It is, it just, I'm not, again, I'm not at a stage in my life where I can deal with things that need to be dealt with today. I can deal with things next week, but yeah.
And I'll make the motion that Allison would be the vice chair.
I second that one.
you were shaking your head no. Was that like, no?
Yeah, I thought you were.
I am open to secretary or vice chair, so it's.
Do you have a motion?
You,
Well, I can,
oh, hang on, can I pick Josh Green for a second? You, Tom said something about the technical part of, secretary, right? Is that, like, where do you see yourself?
yeah, I thought that was Tom, that you were suggesting that Josh would be a committee lead, not an officer.
Yeah, because it's a role that we need to get.
So there
Thank
are two pieces there. So one is information organization, and Josh is really good at that.
Right.
And he built that drive. And I have not, to be honest, been doing a great job of putting it in the right place. And there's a bunch of work that just should be done. And like, when we get all these letters, where do they get filed? And I think Josh should be great at that if he's willing to do it.
Right, so are we calling that the secretary role?
And that is part, I see that as part of the secretary.
Yeah,
Because it's not keeping minutes.
no, I've done that before and I was terrible at that.
But it is just like making sure that we got the minutes.
Yeah.
And not maybe 4 hours ahead of the meeting. Maybe it's-
We're terrible at it.
Well.
Took me a long time.
So,
Corey's gonna be our official historian.
so I guess to some degree, like some external communications, I don't know if that is, I'd have to go revisit our new bylaws, but I don't know if that could fall within the realm of a vice chair. Some degree of communication, because if Josh is willing to handle all that management piece, then maybe some of the external comms can fall under the vice chair. That I would be.
I would say absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. it is.
Well, I've been doing external communications anyway.
Yeah. Fair point. Yeah. Okay.
So I feel like we're looking at
So then Josh was secretary,
Josh as secretary.
vice chair.
Chris as vice chair.
Possess.
The people who are being pointed at, are they agreeing with that?
Well, that's what I was trying to get out of him.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as it's data and not community outreach, I don't have the.
As a group, we can coordinate.
And I'm happy to help you as a committee member
Okay.
with communication part.
In that case, I.
Go with the minutes.
And we.
You're gonna bundle?
I'm gonna. Elect Christiana Relis as vice chair and Josh Lent as secretary.
I second.
All in favor?
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Right.
Yeah, and there are parts of that communication thing, like I can do things like make web pages and set up our Facebook account and stuff. I'm just not good at the stuff that has to be done today.
Thank you.
All righty. Moving right along. Speaking of officers, new members. I guess I'm kind of surprised that nobody came today. I don't know what was in the letter sent. So where's the status of the new membership and the people you reached out to and where I'll get that?
Well, you're referring to the alternate
Yes.
position. So the alternate, it's been tremendous. There are 6 very strong applicants. Extremely pleased about that. As I said at the last meeting, we want to retain them all as partners with the commission. There will be one of them that will get the seat, and we're just beginning that process. They each got a letter last week asking them to give a little more detail, primarily on their availability to meet the expectations and the time expectations. And that was due, it'll be due Friday or early next week. So we'll have that back. So I don't want to speak to anybody at this point in time. We'll have that back. At the last meeting, we created a committee to have a review of those applications. So everybody will have visibility to them, but it'll be Lori, Chris, and myself that will be kind of trying to see if there's strengths, weaknesses, that type of thing, with what direction to go. And I think it's going to be very difficult. So at the next meeting, we will have more input on a recommended candidate, and it will just then go to the select board.
Will they also be able to, like, will we suggest that they come so that we can meet them, or how? Because last time we selected people and they came, and then we made the decision after that as a board. So rather than do it completely offline.
It's a very good point. I was thinking that the committee would do the verbal conversations and things. And at least, and this is another idea, we could maybe have not all 6 of them come, competitive to the next meeting, but maybe if there was a thought that we were on the fence with a couple, then perhaps that would be an option. I'll open that up. So what do you think?
I mean, that sounds like a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just awkward to have 6 people sitting there while we discuss.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yes. I hope they all are, but it's kind of collaborators in total, but with, perhaps 1 or 2 where there might be, there's people, they all probably do, but passion and kind of been in town and done a lot of things. And there's also technical backgrounds, that we already have a fair bit of. So there's things that need to be weighed.
We've discussed too, that even though you have an alternate, the other ones could join in on subcommittees as well.
Yes, but that's what we want to encourage for sure.
Thank you. Yes.
So you're recommending, Tom, that the subcommittee of you, me, and Lori would provide the short list, invite the short list to come to the next meeting. And then we would not discuss in front of them, but encourage them to attend, present themselves, and then we would make the decision hopefully next meeting.
But what are your thoughts?
We need to make a decision next week because the select board is going to want to do an appointment.
Yeah,
Technically, it's been 3.
well, yeah, because they're going to have to approve of whoever we appoint.
So we didn't make a recommendation. So I guess I was hoping that the committee would, I think that's what you said, maybe make a recommendation, sort of a first and run-up candidate.
Okay.
But if at all possible, I mean, it'd be great to have people come and feel welcome and feel like they're a committee. So maybe in the conversations, you could say, is there a committee that you'd like to be on? Like, could they all just come and be slotted in committees? That would be awesome.
Like a regular agenda item with the committee, like what the outreach committee do?
Right.
And yeah.
Right. And I get we don't know what the committees are because we don't really have those committees, but in the conversations with them, maybe that's what we think about. Seems like there should be an outreach committee. Maybe someone is super passionate about trail maintenance.
Mhm.
Maybe there's a trails committee.
I think or maybe they want to create a subcommittee of
Yeah.
some sort.
Yeah, that's like,
Yeah.
one of them has some super interest.
Well, yeah, and some of that would come out of the information that they will be feeding back.
Yeah.
And just so you know, I did put out the 23rd as the deadline for us to get that, but somebody did respond back that they have a good reason why they can't quite hit that date. So it's really early next week. And I also went down here to Sue today and asked her, what is the typical closure time for applications? They don't really have a policy, but I said, we're good.
Usually have one person that we yank.
Right. There ain't out of Main Street.
We've got good
Picking
things
and
happening, so.
screaming, picking and screaming.
So it'll be, there won't, I don't think there'll be any additional ones unless they come in the next 24 hours and
Yeah.
would let you know. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you for doing that. Super helpful. Updates, resource waste, any updates on that?
The time closed on May 12th, and then they said it could take 90 days easily for them to review all the comments. So there probably won't be anything public.
They had a 180 window to make a decision too. So yeah, we clearly had a push from April 12th to May 12th, which is now even another 6 months, you could estimate. The hearing was very much that. It was 3 hours. There was 15 people that went up. We had 2 state legislators and state senator with tough questions. Everybody had different angles they were coming in. And then there was testimony by about, I think it was about 16 that was on that list there. All of them, again, coming from kind of a different angle and very much with legitimate concerns about that facility and that the DES needs to take a look at things. And then written testimony was closed down to 12.
And one couple from Epping showed up.
What?
There was one couple from Epping,
Oh, there was one couple from Epic, yeah. Just residents, yeah.
and there were 5 people from Halls Mill Road. There.
It was very,
We are on the Piscasset.
it was very interesting because the guy who appeared to be the head of the company would not talk on the record, but he kept telling other people what to say.
Yeah. Well, Allison was there.
Okay, well, we'll see what comes of that.
Yep.
Rainbow.
And by the, besides the state legislature, we had 2 select board members there too.
Yeah.
And should be, and we appreciate that.
Yes, and I appreciate the time you've put in for written comments. Variety of people, Mark put in written comments, so appreciate the time you put into that. Hopefully it will help.
Absolutely.
So all the rain barrels plus are sold, so that's done.
Good job. Bylaws, do we have any updates on the bylaws? Are we looking at them? Is that where we're at?
Yeah, it's important. At the last meeting, we followed through with a perception that we had from January that they would go from our draft to get reviewed by legal counsel just to see if there was anything, touchy in there. And so we made a decree motion last meeting to do that. Subsequently to that, Hovey Select Board Chair said that won't be necessary. There's reasons that town council gets involved, and it's usually legal lawsuits and things like that. So it didn't rise to that level, and not to mention the cost factor of that. So they are not going to legal counsel, according to his wishes and mine at this point. And and he did review it. And for tonight, we just ran out of time. He had very few comments to it, but it literally was, Saturday and today for some of these. And so there's no clean copy, but his comments were very good, short, and we can work with those. So it's looking very good at this point. It's been through a lot of review, and with Hobie's endorsement, I guess, once he gets his changes in there, then we'll have a clean copy. For next
And
time.
I think we'll do a final vote. I think we did a conditional vote pending reviews. Final vote.
Yeah.
Get that. Okay, great. Thank you. That's all.
Okay, we did have the invoice. I think I shared that with everyone. So we had budgeted $300 based on the previous year. They raised the requested donation to $350. So we as a board need to agree whether we want to spend the $350 or just send them $300 and say, here's our donation. The town, last year when we got like the last of the invoices in for the audits and so forth, they were okay with, like plus or minus. So if we went from 300 to 350, I don't think that's going to be an issue for the budget for this year. We do have one other monitoring, the Great Bay monitoring
Are you on
donation.
that?
I'm not on the group and I have no, I don't know if we've gotten the request. We can't pay anything without an invoice, but that's a separate question for like, if anybody knows how to get that, then that's what we need. But for the ESR LAC, I would recommend that we pay the $350. And if everybody approves that, then it's simple because that is the invoice that we have. And I'll give that to Sue with the minutes that we have approved it if we do. So I would like to move that we agree to pay ESR LAC $350 for the 2026 year, which is slightly over our $300 budgeted amount.
I second.
You got it. Okay, discussion, comments?
Yeah, what do they bring to Newfields? I think we should delineate
Well,
they are what we did.
they cover the Swampscott River. So the fact that we're bordered by the Swampscott River, this is a community of communities. So community representatives, although it is there's a lot of towns along the Exeter Swampscott River that apparently don't have acting members right now. We have Bill Meserve primarily for representing Newfields and seems to know everything about water, everything. So they give information about upcoming things. So the Exeter Swampscott River is high on the list for monitoring for the impact of inflows and outflows so that they can make a determination of what might be needed to manage the river for the environmental protection of the flora and fauna that live along the river. And obviously that feeds into the Great Bay. So just the fact that we have a boundary, a border that is the Swampscott River means that it allows us to maintain access to information, reports, et cetera. So they just sent out a report about the health of, local rivers, and this would add to that. This would be like the fourth river that might be done, and it's very high on the list because of the amount of data they already have that they could use to continue to build on it. So it's highly likely that it will be the river that is selected to continue this state program.
Yeah, and I'm part of it pays for Teresa Walker. They actually have paid staff, not full time, but they have someone, and volunteer groups do get more done. We have someone who's paid and Teresa's incredibly knowledgeable. And it's one of those communication things. I get a lot of emails that come through the General Conservation Commission, and I don't like to send them all to you guys because I don't want to, it's a conversation we could have some other time. Do you want them all? Is that something the secretary would maybe do a location? But I get a lot of stuff, and a lot of it's just like, did you know there's going to be, a white festival? Did you know there's a gardening thing going on? So they're pretty into.
Which might be something, if we have an outreach committee, that we want to start advertising more about, but.
They do events like the vernal pool event, which I remember going to some of the Newfields kids and stuff, so. All right. Are we ready to vote? All in favor?
Thank you.
Great. Other business, a little bit about that subdivision that you sent, Chris.
Oh, yeah, the town is looking at it and it got continued until next month. Because of some questions that they had that they couldn't answer at last week's select board committee. So.
Planning board,
I'm sorry?
planning board.
The planning board, yes, thank you. The developer is the same one that is planning to do the rug property. And so they are making an accommodation to only put 3 properties. They're platting 4 in addition to what's already there, but they are making an accommodation to put only 3 actually built along Oaklands Road, where they would have the septic right next to the road and the house right behind the septic, because that's the only place they can put it. And then the rest of the property, the bulk of it would go into conservation, but they plan to do the conservation with the state or some other agency, not the town. So it's not a town easement that they want to have. But the developer did make the comment, which was very interesting, that they might trade off some of that land for conservation to accommodate what they need to do for the rug property, which I thought was a little strange. And we will need to watch that.
And where would they put the fourth house?
The fourth house is it's on the property, but they were talking about,
Not
yeah,
across the river.
no,
There's an existing house and they had 3 lots on one side and 1 on the other.
on the other. And so the one closest to Piscassic Road is the one they probably wouldn't build.
Okay.
And then the 3 on Oaklands are the ones they would build. One of the neighbors mentioned that they have some deeded,
Right away.
right, well, it's a deeded place that they can, the water flow, so that they can manage water flow, and they've got some pipes and so forth, and it's in their deed. And the way they're doing the lots is like they've got the 3 houses between the 2 existing houses, and then the lots, to get the size they need, wrap around the existing house. So it's, and the 2 additional, so they're very weird lot lines. So the guy was saying, I'm concerned that somebody will do something without telling me because they don't understand that I have the right of way to do what I'm doing currently. And people across the street were telling me that the land that they said is not wet in the very big storm on Mother's Day of.
That was like
2016.
No, that was like 2020, I mean,
19.
2003 or 4.
Oh, long, okay, but anyway, the water was above, because they were talking about the water lines being, there's 2 different water lines. One is what FEMA says is the wetlands line, which is actually lower than the dam line. So they are covering everything they're required to cover. But people are saying, hey, like I had kids that played in that area for the entire 30 years we've lived here, and they were in the water half the time.
Yeah, it's, I mean, and somebody commented that the Conservation Commission.
Yeah, oh, that was Bill Meserve.
I know.
Yeah, it was Bill Meserve.
That's never approached. Maybe open space.
Is that rug land?
No,
Mm-mm.
no.
Okay.
I mean, maybe when they were doing open space, it was considered, the thing about that is, it's all wet. So why would it, I mean, and that's the thing, it's wet. It's so wet. I mean, we wouldn't even, why bother? Because whoever thought you could build 3 houses on it.
Right.
I mean, literally, that field, I drive by it every day. And I have for 25 years.
Yeah, they're gonna be right up against the road, which is what the current house is.
But that's the thing, it's like, how do they even have backyards? I mean, the backyard is.
Well, the backyard is not gonna be anything they can do anything with unless they put fill in. They found a way to put fill in.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, are they gonna be allowed to do that? Because then that's just gonna end up in the ice pond.
But anyway, from the sounds of the planning board, it's like there were a few questions left. But what the current drawing does is address most of the questions the planning board had previously based on our current ordinances with respect to planning. So it sounds like they're going to get the approval. But they still have to get some additional information and provide that to the planning board. And then I just, the question I raised is like, if Lori doesn't know, probably nobody else here knows, is like, why would anybody say anything about the Conservation Commission having a role in this? Like if the owner didn't want to do conservation,
No, they.
it's
Do
already.
you remember them ever?
I feel like I do remember a conversation around that, and this is, ancient memory, that there was not interest. I mean, I do feel like in the sort of list, and it's wet, so.
Right, I mean,
The only thing,
I think it came up with prime wetland discussion, because it would have been prime wetland.
the only,
and it was Smith, right?
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
But, and the only thing that would be beneficial is that if it were in conservation and it's similar to the, you know, the Fern and Family Farm conservation, for example, is that people are therefore allowed to go on the conserved property. Well, you've got access that has been created over the years off of 87 that people can put kayaks in and, you know, whatever they want to do there, go fishing.
Neighbors snowmobile through that field in the winter too.
Okay. So the people have been using it clearly, and some of those uses may or may not be protected depending on who gets the conservation easement initially. I thought it was really odd that they didn't want to offer the conservation easement to the town at all, but I suspect it's either a bargaining chip of some sort, or just they feel that they can get more money from some other resource that would put it in conservation.
yeah, I mean, there's a fair amount of money for conserving wetlands, so they may just be going for wetlands grants or water protection grants or source protection. So.
Right. So anyway, that's what I just want to make sure everybody was aware of that, because it's going to be probably tied into the rug property as well. And it's still is an ongoing discussion at this point with the planning board.
Thank you for the.
So just for awareness, the developer is Copley Properties. And then the property owners, you know, just in case we hear them again, it's the Gary Smith Revocable Trust and the William and Barbara Tebow Revocable Trust. So there's two trusts involved with that land. If that comes up, then we'll know what they're referencing. I think that I recollect with the rug property that there was going to be extremely conscientiousness towards the conservation and environmental aspects of that property. And this is like horse trading with something that's next door. I think the planning board, you know, needs to be cognizant of that from a conservation standpoint.
But I think that's where our role is, to make sure that we're speaking up about things like that, because that's not their role officially. They just have to enforce the ordinances around.
Is the conservation committee gonna have anything to do with either of these properties?
Well, that's up, I think that's for us to decide. I mean, all we can do at this point is try to be an advocate if we think we want the easement, but that's going to cost money, which is going to be a challenge for the town for the next several years. And we also need to maybe make statements about if they do try to horse trade for rug and concessions on the rug, then we might want to be speaking to that as a representative of the town and the community.
I'm gonna put it on record right now. One of my closest friends is a project manager for that company, so I'll have nothing to do with.
With the
I know about them. I'll have nothing to do with anything that comes up about it then.
Okay, well, now we have a role for the alternate.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cal.
However, the planning board meeting is next month, and they're gonna probably move this forward.
That's what it sounded like, but I'm not an expert in the planning board, but I've been to enough planning boards in other towns that basically their hands are tied. If the developer meets all of the town requirements, then the town cannot make any requirements that aren't in the ordinance.
It's probably next month, they're saying.
Yeah, yeah, they continued it until next month's planning board meeting.
Thank you. Anything else we need to discuss tonight? All right.
Jeez, Tom's been chair for half the night. We're already past 9 o'clock.
I don't know.
I got tonight's a mulligan, right?
Meeting and then we can harass.
I second.
All right.
9:24.
Oh, wait. Okay. Aye.
You. It's gonna be a long, but it's for family time, right?
Big meeting. Yeah, it was.
Have you seen the water on Rockingham Rail Trail? There was something posted in the Facebook group. And I'm like, send a picture. I did figure out how to do it.
down by Newfields.
Yeah, I think it must be in that section.
Alice and I have talked about that.
Okay.
and
Ooh,
Share.
I know, it's the
They
fever,
drain-
deceiver.
yeah.
Yeah.
Start getting access
So
to
the only way of dealing with it